Hi everyone, I'm Katie Teitler, and I am here today with Sam Crowther, founder and CEO of Kasada. Sam, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me, Katie.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about bots, and we've talked with other companies and with other people who are in the bot management space, but Kasada has a little bit of a different focus. So we've talked in the past, and it's always been a really interesting conversation. And just for some background for everybody listening, as you know, bots are an essential part of internet traffic and business operations. They perform repetitive tasks at great speeds, they interact with web pages, analyze content, provide those chat functions. You might like them, you might hate them, but they've become common on websites so that visitors can interact with the company for simple tasks without the expensive human intervention. And those bot functions are necessary, and they're either positive or neutral. But there's obviously another aspect to bots that's not so positive. And we've heard of bot attacks, and we know some of the consequences. But Sam, the scope of the problem is a little more than what people expect. How have bots evolved? What's the problem now? Why can't we just use simple machine learning to help solve this problem?
Yeah, so the problem's interesting in that the more we do online and the more that is exposed online to us from organizations that we interact with, actually the scope of what bots can do increases. So, the very thing that benefits us, which is more smooth online digital interaction, actually benefits the people that are building these bots as well. And events like COVID, where all of a sudden the digital world is the only way in which we can interact with most organizations, that forces up the value and the incentive for the folk who are building and operating these bots on the other side of the equation. And that sort of moves into not just how the bots have evolved, but how the people that build them have evolved as well. There's obviously a continuing increase in sophistication of mechanisms that they're using to build their bots and deploy them. But the thing that's changed the most is actually the avenues that they can exploit. And so, a good example may be all these retail organizations following the Nikes and the Adidases of the world, where they're releasing limited edition products now almost exclusively on the web because of the environment that we're in, which means the folks that we're up against now have a far wider reach and potentially a far wider impact and way to make money than they previously did. Simple things like registering for the vaccine online, right? Again, something that was probably previously unthinkable to do exclusively online has now created a whole new avenue for someone with some technical skills to actually make a lot of money to the detriment of others. And this also means that the economy that supports the building and the creation of these tools has changed as well. Because there's more avenues to make money, there's more incentives to make these tools simpler and cheaper to use for people with maybe not so deep technical experiences, which means that the floodgates have almost opened up, right, to people with very minimal code and experience being able to launch relatively sophisticated automated operations because these tools are just so damn simple now. And that, I think, creates a very interesting storm.
So you mentioned a few things there. The whole idea of bots registering for the vaccine is mind-blowingly horrible, right? That we wouldn't have thought about that a year ago. But what are some other use cases that are becoming prevalent? You mentioned, flooding retail sites with traffic. What else are you seeing that just blows your mind that people can think of to do evil?
Yeah, I think there's probably two main buckets I'd put this in. One would be the more security and fraud bucket. In that side, we're definitely just seeing more of the same in terms of credential stuffing, which is more or less washing stolen credentials from data sets of millions, right? It's becoming more commonplace because again, the tools that are being used are getting simpler and simpler. There's a combination of more data breaches and then more people who want to diversify their income streams because of what's been going on in the world. Similarly, credit card washing and trying to figure out which of your stolen credit cards are good and bad so you can then on-sell them. That's all becoming more and more common. And then on the flip side, on the, I guess, the business angle, what's been very interesting to us is seeing the competitive intelligence side of the world, where now, because the online is basically the majority of most people's businesses, understanding your competitors' prices, their inventory, all of their digital strategies in real time is becoming more and more critical. And we've definitely seen a very large increase of these sort of operations being led by some pretty substantial retailers. And this actually has a bit of a knock-on effect, which I think a lot of people overlook, and that's the cost to sustain it as the recipient. So, if someone wants to scrape all of my, pricing information or wash credentials through my system, I need the service to support that, right? And in the world of, cloud computing, where I pay for usage, if all of a sudden I'm dealing with 10, 20, 100 times the normal traffic that I would need to for my legitimate customers, that's actually a very, very real cost. And we've been seeing some very interesting cases where 90% of the traffic that some of our customers are processing shouldn't be there. And it's in the order of magnitude of billions and billions of events every single month that just have no right to be there, which costs very, very significant sums of money. And it's not terribly good when you have to pay to support activity that you don't want there in the first place.
It's this sabotage of other businesses that somebody with a little bit of an evil mind can affect. So tell us a little bit about Kasada, because there are certainly other companies in your space, but you have a different approach. So why was the company founded, and what's unique about your platform?
Yeah, so we came into existence because we didn't feel that anyone had solved the problem well. And by well, I mean in a way that actually, works out of the box, works day 10, and works, the first year in. Because the reality is we're up against pretty creative people who are very, very financially incentivized. So they're going to spend time and effort trying to beat these systems. And the flip side of them was these systems were very, very complex. Everything that's being offered, if it is going to work to an acceptable degree, requires a lot of human intervention. Changing rules, ensuring that ML algorithms are accurately tuned and whatnot. Like it's a bit of a zero-sum game for us as the defenders. And
really, just not to interrupt, but it's funny that you say that, because it takes a lot of human intervention to combat an automated problem.
Exactly, and it shouldn't, right? And that's one of the, and then we sort of believe one of the core reasons that this occurred is because all of these tools and products have been built in the same way that, like, we built our WAFs, for example, right? And that fundamentally comes down to everything is assumed to be good until it misbehaves. And that may work in certain use cases, like a WAF, although that is arguable. But in the case of preventing bots, it creates a big problem, and that is you give someone a window of opportunity to be successful. And if you think about what makes bots unbelievably viable, that's scale, right? And so that means someone can scale out this window of opportunity to be successful almost indefinitely if they can scale out their operation enough. And by just allowing, one or two interactions from a news source to hit an origin server and to, say, perform a login or to load data, you've inherently failed in a sense, because I just need to scale that up across 100,000 IP addresses or 1 million IP addresses, 1 million unique HTTP headers, and I've now won, right? The system has no way of protecting me. And so because of that, the way we thought about this is, if we kind of flip this on its head, right, and actually look at how other components of security have evolved, which is moving towards the guilty until proven innocent. In other words, in order to get access and perform any simple task, you actually need to prove that you're able to be there, right? That you are who you say you are, you're in a legitimate environment, and then you get through. And that's very advantageous in a game where, scale and agility is the adversary's advantage, because it flips it, right? And all of a sudden, instead of us having to keep up with the adversaries, we built something where they, in a sense, have to keep up with us. Because instead of trying to figure out if they're misbehaving. We're asking them a simple question, and that is, are you in a legitimate environment that should be accessing this website?
So in terms of your platform, tell us a little bit about it. How is it deployed? What's behind it that makes it different? We touched on automation. You talked a little bit about behavioral aspects of bots, and that's a lot of where other companies focus. But why focus on automation, and how does it work with your product? And what's the accuracy that someone could expect if they decide to deploy Kasada?
Yeah, so our product sits in the layer in front of a customer's web application. So it runs as an alternate origin behind usually a CDN. And the way it functions is before any traffic is allowed to hit our customer's server or application through us, we force the incoming connecting client, whatever it may be, to prove that it's either a legitimate mobile app, a legitimate browsing environment. And this component where we're going after the actual automation itself as opposed to the behavior up front means that in a split second, we're actually able to make very, very, very quick and accurate decisions, right? Because it's very clear when something is not operating in a legitimate browser environment. Like there's a lot of telltale signs. So up front, that means all of a sudden now the adversaries are on the back foot. But then ongoing, we don't want to just stop, right? We don't want to say, okay, all of these are humans, we'll let them through and not watch them anymore. That's where the second part comes in, because monitoring the behaviors is absolutely an important aspect. But in order to be successful against bots, you can't do one without the other, right? It really has to be the both, because the first one really inhibits someone's ability to scale. And then the second one inhibits the more, using the behavior inhibits the more sophisticated operations, which, maybe going from like one or two machines. So they really play very, very well together in that regards.
So in terms of accuracy, you're looking first at automation, and you can't rule out every automated bot because, for instance, Google uses bots to help index your website. And then next, it's on the behavior, because if you have, it's theoretically possible that a human could be trying to perform some of these types of attacks too. So how does this help with zero-day threats and retooling attempts?
Yeah, so where this is very advantageous to the things that have not been seen before is that upfront step where before anyone can get in, we actually force them to be in a legitimate browsing environment. And what this does is it actually forces the people that we're up against to play in our playing field that we've created, right? So instead of having the ability to live in the wiggle room or that I guess time period of opportunity to use their old tools, which they will be able to do and are able to do in certain other cases. For us now, they actually have to build very, very specific tool sets that exist within legitimate browsers. And that's very, very powerful because it removes that aspect of simplicity. It's no longer just a free tool that you can get and then slightly modify yourself, which is going to be successful. You now need to have a really, really deep understanding of how you actually, leverage automation within browsing environments. And from a retooling perspective, it makes it very challenging because, again, you're forced into a very specific environment that we have a lot of control over, which is the browser, because we can run our code in there. And those two, components mean that it doesn't matter if someone goes and writes a new bot in Python that's not ever seen before. They could be using completely new IP addresses, completely new user agent headers and HTTP headers. It doesn't matter because they aren't proving that they're inside a legitimate browser. And that's the key question, that just asking that up front, something as simple as that, just has such an unbelievable impact.
So how is Kasada deployed? How quickly does it start working? What changes, if any, do users have to make within their environments to make sure it's running correctly?
Yeah, so this was another, component that we wanted to address in the market, right? Technology can be unbelievably simple when it's built well. And so what we ended up going with is a platform that runs at the network layer. So it sits behind a customer CDN and in front of their application server. They choose which components of their traffic they want to route to us. Maybe it's the login page, maybe it's the registration page. And we actually act as that, that man in the middle, intercept and modify things as needed. So they don't need to, worry about engaging their product or engineering team because it's all completely transparent. So it means from an implementation perspective, we can quite literally sit down with, a network engineer and implement the product and go into blocking mode within the same hour. And we've done this with a number of very, very large customers.
What types of companies tend to gravitate towards the Kasada product?
Yeah, so most of our customers have mostly two things in common. Firstly is they have a web presence where there's a lot of value through it and interacting with their customers on it. So like a good example would be Hyatt Hotels, who we work very closely with, who are an awesome publicly referenceable customer where they have a very, very valuable online platform, which not only has intellectual property in the form of pricing data about their rooms and the room availability, but also a lot of customer data, right, through their loyalty programs. And those two aspects, for us at least, they create an application that needs protection because there's enough for someone to go after. The other component is almost all of our customers actually were using other tools before us, right, to try and solve the problem. And because what they're offering is so valuable and juicy to the people that they're up against, the tools just did not stand the test of time. And they came to us when the tools kept failing and when they were starting to invest far too much money in the maintenance of these things just to have them, somewhat effective, but not nearly to the level that they need.
So it sounds like you're helping a lot of companies. We've talked a little bit about the platform. What's next? What are you looking forward to showing the market? Obviously, you're a younger company. You've got a lot of ideas. So what can people expect next 6, 12, 18 months from Kasada?
Yeah, so, we're actually almost ready to roll out a new version of our defense platform, which we'll be talking about in the next 2 months. And this is, a huge overhaul from all the learnings that we've been fortunate enough to have on our customers' platform in the real world, which I think is truly going to be absolutely game changing in terms of how we defend and protect our customers. Then the next component is how we actually help others gain a benefit from the job that we do without necessarily working with us. And we sit on a lot of very interesting data which could help a lot of organizations protect themselves from these sorts of attacks without necessarily having to work with us day to day. And so we're looking at how we can share some of that with organizations around the world. So the things that we protect our customers from can ultimately actually benefit organizations around the world, which ultimately means the people who would have been impacted by their credentials being taken or impacted by their credit cards being stolen.
So it's about you protecting your customers and your customers protecting themselves as well as their end customers. So it's really a win-win game.
Exactly, and that's the way that we view it, right? We're not here to just stop account takeover on customer X. We understand that we play a broader role in almost the internet as a whole, right? Every time we stop something bad happening from impacting even just one individual, we see that as a huge win in the overall trust, right, that everyone has in the system, so that we can do more online, so that everyone's lives can be better because everyone inherently trusts this system more. And the broader reach we can have, we see that as a huge win for that goal of making sure that we play the part that we have to in order to help keep people safe and trusting the internet.
Well, that's certainly a noble goal, and we certainly hope you win because we need more of that. So Sam, thank you for joining me today. Thanks for talking about Kasada and your platform. For all of you watching, thanks for spending time with us today. Go visit our friends at Kasada online. Look at what they do, give them a call, and see if this is something that would work for your company. Again, Sam, thanks. And to everybody else, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Katie.